Nariman Aga Tagiyev, an application security expert whose journey from competitive programming in Turkmenistan to leading enterprise security programs is both inspiring and instructive. With over 2 decades of software development experience across diverse technology stacks, including native cloud environments, Nariman brings a unique perspective that bridges the gap between development and security. Since 2016, Nariman has been at the forefront of application security, spearheading comprehensive application security programs and secure software development lifecycle initiatives at major international corporations. His deep expertise with industry-leading frameworks like BSIMM, OWASP SAMM, and the NIST SSDF has made him a go-to authority for organizations looking to mature their security practices. As a certified secure software lifecycle professional by ISC2, Nariman combines formal credentials with real-world experience, making him the perfect guest to discuss today's topic: preparing for the EU CRA and what it means for the future of application security. We'll explore how this groundbreaking legislation is reshaping the security landscape and what organizations worldwide need to know to stay ahead of the curve.
The Application Security Podcast is brought to you by Security Journey. Our training includes theory and immersive learning that teaches the skills and knowledge needed to create a security-first mindset across your organization. Learn more at securityjourney.com.
Hey folks, welcome to another episode of the Application Security Podcast. My name is Chris Romeo. I am a general partner at CRE Ventures and also an application security super fan, I think, maybe a super fan at this point. Joined by my good friend Robert, who is fresh from the desert, so he has no money left at this point. He put all the money on red, and I don't think that worked out. Is that what you did, Robert? Did you go red?
Well, neither one, but definitely fresh from Las Vegas, where there were a lot of two great conferences there, lots of great opportunities to meet people. So yeah, Robert Hurlbut, I'm a principal product security architect, as well as threat modeling trainer with Torion, and great to be here to talk about application security.
Yeah. Did you gamble even a quarter?
No, not really, because I knew where that was heading. So
Yeah. The house always wins. People always forget that when they go to Vegas. Like, there's a reason they have all these giant buildings in the city, and they can pay the power bill and everything for it. So they always win statistically. If you're good at math, they always win.
Indeed.
So enough about Las
Indeed.
Vegas. So we're joined by Nariman. I had a chance to meet Nariman at RSA. We sat down to talk about his new company and consulting endeavors, and said, we gotta chat with Nariman on the AppSec podcast. So Nariman, we always jump right in with our guests. We give you no time to warm up. We want to get right to your security origin story. So how'd you get into security?
All right. And yes, indeed, we met at RSA at a very important stage of my life where I had a turning point. I have been working for a corporate for the last 15, 18 years. And I took a decision to move and try to do some entrepreneurship back then. And your feedbacks, your thoughts were very critical and was inspiring for me when we were chatting back then at RSA. But coming to my security origin story, I grew up in a country far, far away from Las Vegas. It's called Turkmenistan. It's somewhere between Europe and China, somewhere halfway, Central Asia. And we didn't have technology developed so much compared to back then when I was small, but I was lucky enough to have very good teachers in computers, computer class, and he motivated me to start to put my candidateship to international Olympiad team in computers. I was started very early with programming when I was 12, 13 years old. He was a very inspiring teacher back then. And the idea at that Olympiads is that you get a bunch of inputs and you have to solve a problem that maybe does some optimization work, calculation work based on input, and you have to get some output file. And when you solve this problem, it seems to be working, but when jury tries to assess you, how good you are at that Olympiad, they're trying to break your algorithm. They're trying to give you these files, like you think you're maybe planning like traveling salesman for like 10 points, 15 points, they give you 1,000,000 points. Or they give you like input number of travel points -5 or 3.5. So they will try to break or give you corrupt inputs in all kind of way, just to make sure you can compete and you can measure who is a better programmer compared to other children. And it embedded in my blood that I have to write my algorithm, my code, bulletproof, because always will be bad input, because that's the way we compete. They try to break our code, and I try to like make it work with any input possible, with whatever way you try to abuse it. Fast forward, I knew I want to be a computer engineer, so I moved to Turkey and I studied computer science there in a very beautiful city. It's called Izmir, a bit similar to Barcelona in Spain, so it's very fancy and very nice place. There, at my first jobs, I already was a bit interested to like test my stuff properly. When I get a task, just to make a data entry screen, and I would just use the frameworks available at that corporate to make that web interface, let's say. I would not just test that data entry screen is working. I would also try to play with the filters, with all kind of anything I can click around, and I would only break and do SQL injection or like crash the backend. Because when I deliver my small data entry screen, I want to make sure it's bulletproof and nobody can break it. All their B2C customers cannot break it. And that's how it stuck to me. So I would like test very thoroughly everything. Again, 5-10 years further, in 2015-16, basically 9 years ago, I was already living in the Netherlands, where I am at the moment. I was working for a big international corporate here, and the cybersecurity became more popular those years, and our customers start to ask us, "Hey, what are you doing for secure software development lifecycle? Do you have a documentation describing your activities?" We didn't have those. We were doing some things, but nothing was well documented. And people asked who would like to volunteer to improve our maturity, document it properly, implement activities, and do all this stuff. I stepped up to become a cybersecurity architect back then. And apparently I was the only one. So nobody else could see the future of cybersecurity except me. Luckily, I'm very happy that I chose this path. It took me 3-4 years to assess, made lots of rounds of assessments, like see where are our gaps. Back then, I was using BSIMM. BSIMM is a maturity framework with like 110, 115 different questions you ask to development teams, and you try to find the gaps and what's missing, and you plan some improvement. And I would start to introduce those things. We didn't have things like threat modeling. I would start research, try to find my ways around, implement it, document it. SCA, implemented, documented, SAST, and I had to go through like all it by myself. And I was not so aware about OWASP events. I was not aware of all this community around cybersecurity back then. I was a single person trying to do stuff. Only years later, when I started to go more actively in the Netherlands to Dutch OWASP chapters, I discovered OWASP SAMM, proper way to do threat modeling, lots of new things, new frameworks, DSOMM, and I start to bring those to our organization, our corporate, and spread around the things, security champion program, threat modeling properly, and making teaching the teachers so that they spread it further. And it was a difficult path because if you want to introduce a maturity framework like SAMM or OWASP SAMM, that's a software assurance maturity model. They have 90 activities that you could do, and it gives you this way to measure yourself internally and plan properly the small steps. Plus, it has also this guidances from community, from people like me, you, Robert, and we probably all know this OWASP SAMM. We refer to different resources in the community to make those activities happen. And the SAMM and OWASP participation was really a turning point for me, and to bring lots of inspiration.
Very cool. And you mentioned OWASP several times. Great things that they're doing, and so that's fantastic that you learned a lot by attending those groups and helping you out in your own career. So fantastic to hear. So jumping in on our topic today, Nariman, what is the EU CRA?
Yeah. So, well, in Europe, I live here for 12 years. We are very innovative with legislations, right? That's the best thing we do. In US, companies are much faster with introducing new technology, adapting this. EU is good with legislations, and very often legislations are quite bureaucratic and not very useful. Like cookie law, European cookie law, that you have to show that you're using cookies. That was introduced by one politician here in Netherlands. It's I wouldn't say the name of the party, there's not one of people. But his idea was to inform European consumers that some websites can be consuming your resources, your RAM, and abusing the situation. But it was taken to a totally different direction, and now he's ashamed that he proposed the EU cookie law. He told it himself. Then you have GDPR law, which had also good intentions. That's about protecting the privacy and the ownership that people own their data. You have rights to be forgotten. You have rights to get a copy of your data. Good intentions, but it was not very clear how to comply. The checks are not done, controls are not done. And lots of companies are doing it just a checklist. Hey, yes, we have a PowerPoint with the steps, with some questions. Somebody sends it to you. You say, yes, I considered using as little as possible personal data. And you do it once for a huge cloud service. So I don't think it's really useful for most of the time. It's not done properly. But the problem there is that legislators, the commissioners, EU commissioners, they were doing their own stuff without having knowledge in technology and cybersecurity. CRA, it's a new act, it's a new law that was developed totally different. This time, it happened better. There was first version where that intention to make sure that all the software and the products with software components are safe for end users, that's safe from the data side, like from confidentiality and but when the first version came out, lots of foundations stepped up. So Linux Foundation, Oracle Foundation, OWASP SAMM team, and many more volunteers from OWASP in Europe. They volunteered to contribute to EU Commission. And we went a couple of times to Brussels. We sit and gave our feedback. We had a brainstorm how this new law will work in the practice. And after a couple of rounds, actually, it ended up to be quite good legislation with new act, new document. But of course, I didn't say yet what is it. So I just gave the story. So the intention is that EU wants to make sure that the products with software components, it's almost everything, right? It's from your fridge to vacuum cleaners and almost anything you buy today has some software components, cars, everything, that they are developed with a security by design, that security is not afterthought, but while you're developing, that you're doing a proactive thinking of security. You do threat modeling, you do SCA, you scan your third-party components, you do static code analysis, you have a proper plan for incidents response. So when there's a problem, immediately within 24 hours, you have to report to certain national authorities, and they will coordinate with other companies if they have the same problem. They will help each other. Then within the 7 days, you have to give an update, like exactly what happened and what did you do about it. And then you have to also follow up that, hey, after like 3-4 weeks, what is the final decision? Are you releasing a hotfix or not? So all this life cycle of incident response has to be very well documented. And after release, life cycle until end of life, that is also now well defined. So you cannot just sell some products and forget about it. You have to support it at least for 5 years or until end of product life cycle. So if it's clearly communicated that this product will be on the market for 3 years, that's fine. But normally it's 5 years you have to support hot fixes for cybersecurity because it's a new law. And everyone, even small manufacturer, everyone has obligation to comply. And also if you're outside of Europe, so you have some software, right, yourself. You have some startups you develop, right, Devici, the threat model tool, and other, now you have initiatives, Chris. If you want to sell it in Europe, but of course, if you want to sell it on-premise in Europe, not cloud solution, if you want to sell something on-premise, if it's a product that they can install locally, or if it's some some hardware with a software in it, you have to have evidence that you did secure by design activities during development going forward. And there are some small details, like if you're just making a printer for home, so that falls under this general default home compliances. At the moment, you have to do self-assessment, but for example, German government already prepared a portal where you have to upload your self-assessment. So it's not just, I'm going to do something. You have to upload there, and they recommend to use maturity frameworks like OWASP SAMM. It's clear in their guidances there. You have to do structured documentation of all the stages of your life cycle, from design, implementation, operation, governance, like it's described in SAMM or BSIMM, whatever you use. You have to upload evidences. They're not going to assess it, but for all these basic compliances, you do it. But if you make a modem or some firewall product or some more critical infrastructure thing, then you fall under category 1 and 2 classes, and then you will have to be assessed. So you have to be certified. So every country will have certain authorities that can do that for you.
Are they uniform though? If I certify in one country, do I then get across the board?
Looks like there will be like one organization that will be giving permissions to different companies in Europe to do the assessment. But in the timeline, there is a end of this year is only the moment where that will be defined finally. So that part is still being worked out, the rules, how to become one of these assessment companies. Looks like by end of 2025, that's a moment when that will be clear. But by end of 2026, like in 15 months, 18 months, that is the moment when the incident response obligations come into play. So you have to start to report to these national authorities when you have any problem or compromise, end of 2026. And 2027, middle-ish, you have to have full evidence and documentation that you're doing secure by design activities.
Yeah. How complicated is this legislation? Like how many pages? If I'm a small product company and I make a class 1 device for some reason, like how complicated is this thing that I have to comply with?
So it's long and the language is difficult to track, but you can, especially if you do self-assessment, you have some easier way to start to do it, more practical way. And the easiest way, in my opinion, is to use OWASP SAMM.
Okay, so I can use OWASP SAMM as my evidence.
Yeah, so OWASP SAMM core team members, we did assessment of EU Cyber Resilience Act based on SAMM questions, and we have all the statistics. So on average, for example, you need to have 3 out of 3 in OWASP SAMM language for operations column, because operations is one of the columns, one of the business functions in OWASP SAMM. It has lots of activities because there is lots of attention for post-release activities. So there you have to do everything what is in SAMM. Plus, you also need to report to national authorities. But that one is not in SAMM because SAMM is technology agnostic. It's not only for Europe, it's also for US. So we didn't write in OWASP SAMM guidances. Here is the organization where you need to report. So that is missing in OWASP SAMM. But most of stuff you need to do according to SAMM plus do reporting. Then
is OWASP SAMM mentioned in the act itself? Like is OWASP in this legislation?
No, the act says you need to do secure by design, but then each country publishes their own guidances where to report and how. Like in Germany is today first one to do it. They explicitly mention OWASP SAMM and BSIMM and maturity things.
Gotcha. So it's just Germany's the only one that's kind of is at the forefront of describing the implementation guidance of how you do this thing.
Yeah. I expect that the rest of the countries will follow, because today, if you want to structurally document your development lifecycle, secure development lifecycle, focusing on secure development lifecycle and not broader, like R&D activities, you have only 2 options. You have OWASP SAMM, you have BSIMM, in my opinion. Because these 2 frameworks help you document, and they not only help you assess, but they also help you improve. Because you can plan the roadmap, you have guidances how to improve, you have this community, monthly community calls, you join, you ask questions to OWASP members, like how to do this, how to do that. They're helping. If you want to pay, you can hire BSIMM and Synopsys, and they will send experts that will help you to comply as well. So that's going do it yourself compared to paying for that. But there's two options basically today. And other frameworks like cyber NIST frameworks, for example, CSF, they are more control frameworks. They say you need to have third-party component security, but it doesn't say you how, or it doesn't say you how to measure. But in some has criteria questions. It says, if you want to say, yes, I'm doing third-party component security, here are 3 things you should be doing. It says, are you doing them? Do you have means to find the components you're using? Do you have means to find the problems you have there, like vulnerabilities? And do you have means to like fix it? So the basic things. And then you're level 1. If you have automated, you're level 2. So the
hardest part is finding the things that are out there. But Nariman, I'm curious though, why do we care about this? Like why? And I would say I'm a bit of a regulatory pundit to some degree, and it's a lot of it is because I grew up in the common criteria world. So like a previous iteration of trying to do this specifically at the product level and trying to have different company or different countries have different licensing and laboratories that did assessments. I kind of grew up in this. And so I know all the struggles that come out of trying to do this. So I guess at the end of the day, why do we care about it, and who should care about it, I guess, as well? Like if I'm just a general AppSec practitioner working inside of a big company, do I even care about this?
Why do I care? You have to answer that with 3 different hats. Okay. As a citizen, let's say European citizen, why I would care is that when I buy a smart lamp or vacuum cleaner or any equipment for home, for example, I want to make sure that the part will be patched if there is vulnerability. I want to make sure that there are no hard-coded secrets, that default patches are all like not in it, because having secret scanning is one of the requirements in Secure by Design. So it is when I see the CE sign, and in Europe, whatever you sell, you have the CE signs that show that it's safe for consumers. CRA is part of the CE; it's extension to CE basically. So when I see that CE sign, going forward, I will feel more confident that at least there is some basic security in place. So that's why do I care as a citizen? Okay. Why do I care as a software manufacturer located in Europe? For example, I'm here. I want to use it in my advantage, maybe to have a proper, when I'm selling in tenders. So look, I'm compliant, I have a proper documentation, evidence. Now lots of customers care about it, so I can use for advantage. Why would I care when I'm software manufacturer in US or device manufacturer with a software component in US? You don't want to be kicked out from European market. So you would care. You have to do it. And yeah, you have to do some evidence. You have to have some structure that. And finally, as a cybersecurity expert, right, not software manufacturer, like consultant, like we are, 3 of us, and lots of your listeners are cybersecurity experts or engineers in this. They work in this area. Why would you care? Well, it's a big wave of work. You should be aware of that, and you should not miss this opportunity because awareness is coming. It's in Europe at the moment. I know in US there are also some laws coming, like you have new rule that SCA and SBOMs need to be created and published. You can tell me more details of what US is expecting from software companies, but some expectations are coming, obligations are coming for Europe into US software companies. But as a software engineers, security engineers, as security experts, for us, we need to be aware. We have lots of work to do. We will need to help software manufacturers design and implement their software in a secure way. And we need to know how to do it structurally. You cannot just walk in and say, hey, I think you should do SCA. I think you should do SAST. I think you should do DAST. Just last month, I was consulting one company. They hired one of these big 4 consultancy companies before. They hired them and asked help to define their security roadmap. They got a report with 7 topics. Okay, you need to do SCA, you need to do SAST, you need to do DAST, you need to do this. And that's it. That's not how you should help software companies to be more mature. You should make broader assessment with all these activities. And you need to understand that the policies, each software company today has some sort of security policy, development policy. You need to understand that these in-house secure software development lifecycle policies, they are perfect world scenario. So if you have one that you share with customer, if you have a software company, you have this policy for security, that is your perfect world scenario. But if you actually go on the floor and talk with teams, perhaps you're halfway compliant in reality. Not every team actually doing all this stuff, which is written down in a corporate policy, what you're supposed to be doing. So that's like perfect world scenario. So what you need to do is you are using survey like SAMM, like BSIMM, go team by team, divide into scopes, ask questions, and then you compare how far you from the target that the company policy or CRA or different legislations, they can be your targets. And then you can measure, okay, based on my SAMM assessment, I am 70% on the target for the operations. I'm like 40% on target for my implementation activity, design activities. And then you can define small improvement steps for this quarter, for this year, on the 3-4 elements, and you work on them. Then you do reassessment again, and you can do a small iteration again. So that's how it works. So I mentioned your different hats, right? As engineer, as a citizen. That's why I would care.
No, it makes sense. It's definitely, if you're building something and you want to sell in Europe, just like every other legislation that's ever been tied to product security, it's a barrier to sales. And so that will drive people going down the compliance route.
And one rumor I heard, not official information, is that this law also will help to control the market. So if you produce something in US, in California, and if we don't like Californians anymore, and then European legislators can make all kind of problems and say, look, we think you're not compliant, and then they kick you out of the European market. So this is also a political tool. So why do I care? As a politician, that like another 6 hat. As a politician, it gives me another power tool to kick out Chinese brands like that produce some networking equipment, GSM equipment. I can say, you're not compliant, prove it to me. And it's not enough to be compliant at the release time. Let's say you delivered this tool to Europe, but 1 year later, it's sold out. But 1 year later, if you don't deliver on disclosing your problems, because there is also 5-year hotfix period afterwards, suddenly you're not CRA compliant afterwards. So it's a very strong tool.
It's a political weapon as well.
As well.
I'll go further. I'll describe it as it's a political weapon for sales and for controlling markets and stuff, which it has this whole other dangerous side there to it.
Yeah,
definitely. So how does EU CRA perhaps apply to open source library owners?
Okay, yeah. So statistics show, right, so that every software sold has like 70-80% open source code in it, right? At least all new software. When you go to a big old corporates that has lots of Fortran code, maybe like 90% is actually their in-house things. But modern software is like 70-80% of lots of third-party packages. And behind the third-party packages, you might have some maintainers who like maintain that repository. You could have volunteers who are contributing as a hobby at night. Now, when you made a device with that 70% open source components, and suddenly your device is vulnerable because of that open source library you're using, whose obligation it is to fix it? Who will lose a CE mark? Do you think it's open source maintainer?
No, it's going to be the commercial company that built the thing.
So the first person to make money on it is liable. So if I am using some third-party libraries that I'm paying for, if they're making money on that, then they are liable. I can say, hey, I'm using this, this modem inside my fridge, and that modem is from that company. They are also CE certified. especially in a contract, you also probably will make it very clear. The first people to make money in that upper supply chain are liable there.
Oh, interesting. So it's the beginning of the supply chain then, where the first time somebody makes money with it.
Yes.
So like if I was to build a smart refrigerator, as long as I go and build and outsource all the components of it, including the software, I'm not liable for it as a company.
Normally not, but so that's what is used as a wording, that the first to make money on it. But if you outsource it to China, that element, and you say, hey, you're liable, look, I'm getting fined, you need to fix it. And they say, sorry, we are bankrupt now. Good luck with that. So you need to make sure to have very good contract. You need to do very good due diligence on your supply chain. When you pick third-party components, you need to make sure that you pick the ones that are maintained. So that also helps the security of your own product. That forces you a little bit to think before you include it. And of course, the volunteers that are just doing it as a hobby, they are not liable. They don't have to do it. So if you are using, maybe you are contacted as a volunteer, as open source contributor, and corporate says, I depend on you and you have vulnerability, I cannot sell anymore. Maybe you're nice, maybe you ask for money to fix it. So that actually contributes open source community, because now they are not these volunteers that are just doing stuff for free and they're not important. Now they are important, and companies will be interested to recognize them and make sure that they pick open source libraries that are responsive and are ready to do maintenance, etc. But of course, there is another side of it. CRA recognized concept called open source stewards, and stewards are foundations that collect under their umbrella big popular open source libraries like Eclipse Foundation, like Linux Foundation. And if you are, as a manufacturer, using one of that open source libraries from Oracle Foundation, for Linux Foundation, it's not your liability anymore. The stewards, the foundation themselves, will be doing those obligations of incident response, reporting to the government when there's a problem, coordinating with their contributors, fixing, etc. So there is some, it helps a bit using those foundation projects, because at least there you get rid of that liability. So you see, it's not that clear how it will all end up, but it's very clear that open source community and the way it works will change in the future.
I mean, it sounds like it's going to change for the better, though. It's adding some infrastructure. So an offshoot or an offset of the CRA is that those foundations are going to take on more responsibility amongst their products or their libraries and things that are under their umbrella, and they're going to do the incident response. They're going to take care of the regulatory requirements for it. So no matter what happens with the CRA, that sounds like a positive move forward.
Finally, if you have your own open source library, you're a maintainer, but you're making money out of it. Let's say you actually offer paid services for that. For example, you have it clearly stated on your website, if you need me to fix something, or here's a paid thing. So if you're making money on your open source library, you are also obliged to report and fix the problems as well, because then you're also making money out of that. But of course, if it's very obvious, you can be fined. But if it's not very obvious, if you just get a button, get me like sometimes I see this get me coffee button, buy me beer button. So if they see that, probably you're not making money and they can ignore you. But if you're clearly making money, like let's say you have a Defect Dojo, OWASP Defect Dojo, open source project, but there is a paid tier on top of that. They cannot say we don't care, we're not going to fix it, because now they're also making money next to it. They offer some more services.
How long do you think that this is going to take to shake out? So when I think about GDPR, and I'm actually a proponent of GDPR, as a privacy advocate, I like a lot of the things that GDPR mandates. It didn't shake out the way that I hoped, as far as changing the scope of how privacy is protected. It started to have an impact in the United States, and then it kind of willowed away over time. but it took years to get there, right? Like there were two lawsuits. I think it was Facebook and somebody else. The EU sued them for 100 billion euros or something, some gigantic number, which then kind of started the movement of people starting to comply with GDPR and do the things that they at least try to do the things they were supposed to do. Do you think the EU CRA is going to have a similar timeline? Is it going to be
Yes.
years? And then somebody's going to get sued. Somebody big is going to get sued, and then that's going to start the people everybody moving in the right direction.
I saw interesting research on this, where when one researcher, I forgot her name, sorry, but she was comparing GDPR fines with expected CRA fines. And indeed, it took 2-3 years until GDPR fines peaked. In the beginning, it was very little, was not clear who is going to do that, etc. Only when somebody complains, they would look into that, in the problem. There was no proactive investigations. After 2-3 years, the GDPR fines peaked and they went down. With CRA, expectation is that once it's in place, end of 2026, it will take 2 years until fines will peak. And do you know what fines are? They are huge. They are 2% of your global revenue. It's not profit. It's everything comes in before you make costs. 2% of global revenue is the fine up to. You can get fined that. So it can be very significant. And yeah, the expectation that the total amount of fines will be like double of GDPR compared to.
Oh, wow.
others. I saw the graph,
we'll
they
have
overlap GDPR with CRA, and CRA was like double that.
Wow.
So we'll have a really big impact. So, okay, well, Nariman, this has been really good. For me, as somebody who sits in the United States, and honestly, I haven't paid that much attention to CRA, other than to know threat modeling is referenced in it, which I was cheering for. Like, anytime we move threat modeling forward, I guess, what would be a key takeaway or a call to action for our audience? What can they do with this new knowledge of CRA? What should they do?
Not because I'm OWASP SAMM member, but I think key takeaway is to look into maturity frameworks like OWASP SAMM, because your main listeners are security engineers, security experts. You have knowledge in certain areas of cybersecurity, but framework like OWASP SAMM will give you a big picture. It's more like on governance, a global level, high level. When you look at DSOMM, a DevSecOps maturity model, it focuses specifically on developers, DevOps people. It gives very concrete technical activities to those people. But when you look at SAMM, it's more like high level, more on the language that managers will understand what's need to be done. So looking into OWASP SAMM, I think it's a key takeaway. If you never looked into that, you need to check it out, what the activities are. You can try to do assessment of your own teams. If you're working for some corporates, try to do a round of assessment of a pilot team, and you will like it. You probably will propose it to do it continuously and see how far are you from your corporate policy or from CRA. And one of the two sub-projects of SAMM, one of them is benchmarks, where you can compare yourself with the industry. You can see by different industries, like how mature are they. Some practitioners contributing data. And other, like a big project of SAMM, is mappings. So we map those SAMM activities to different frameworks like ISO, from NIST, from CRA, and you can download it as an Excel file with a machine readable format, and you can easily see which SAMM activity maps to what CRA activity or NIST cybersecurity framework activity or ISO 27001 or whatever you're using. There are so many different mappings that you can find there. Of course, SAMM doesn't cover 100% of all of those, but it's a starting point. It's the place where you start from, and then in every activity, in every guidance link in that description of that activity, we have link to openCRE project. And openCRE, it's a graph of all frameworks. So it's a mapping of mappings. So once you jump to openCRE, it's like Pandora box where it takes you to everywhere. Okay, for this activity in ISO, it's that standard. In NIST, it's that activity. So basically, it's all interconnected. But starting point is SAMM. You do assessment. You see big picture. I need to do third-party component security. Okay, once I do it, which controls I'm satisfying? Then you go to openCRE through the link, and you find all the controls that you satisfied.
Okay,
that's my takeaway.
People should take a look at SAMM, hopefully all of our listeners, we've talked about SAMM a lot over the years. Hopefully they've taken a look at it, but if not, this could be a good jumping off point in preparation for dealing with CRA. Sounds like it's going to impact us over the next number of years if we're working for companies that are building stuff. Doesn't matter where we are on Earth, we all want to sell in Europe. So it's eventually, if it may not be this year or next year, but it'll be coming around and be something we have to experience. So Nariman, thank you for sharing your knowledge about CRA. I learned a number of cool things. Didn't realize the SAMM team was doing reviews of the CRA and providing feedback and going to their headquarters and stuff. So that's really cool. So thank you for sharing this expertise with us. And we look forward to seeing you at an event in the future.
Right. Thank you, Chris. Thanks, Robert. It was nice to see you again, and see you in future events.
Awesome.